Hello, welcome in, welcome in. Amanda here from Sober and Beyond, doing our usual Tuesday live, straight from my folder. Today's topic, as y'all know, I facilitate group meetings at a rehab. And Tuesday, I like to share what the meeting was about. Because I think these topics that we discuss in the group, they apply for family members as well. And sometimes as a family member, you feel like you're on the outside of a lot of it. And this is your opportunity to get a firsthand insider perspective. What's going on with my hair? It looks weird. Little poof there. Little insider perspective on what they're actually doing in there. Today, we discussed family dynamics, and this extends to friendships. It also includes partners or relationships and coworkers, too. How these family dynamics play a role in addiction and how to get out from under that. This is a really big one for addicts to understand, but also for the family members to understand. It's very easy to become defensive, which is understandable because you're defending your unity, your people, and that's actually what you're supposed to do. So, our natural tendency would be to preserve and to protect. However, this is a safe space and we're not talking about shaming or blaming. We just need to look at why things are happening, what participation is in the happenings, and how we can become healthier versions of ourselves. That's ultimately what your loved one with the addiction, when they're in a rehab, that's what they're doing. They're trying to become a healthier version of themselves. Okay, family dynamics, and I have my actual papers that I used in the group so that I don't get sidetracked because I do. All right. Something that I think we can all relate to is starting a habit, going along on the habit, and you're doing pretty good. Maybe there's been some setbacks, but ultimately you're doing good. And then you revert back to old behaviors. There's a lot involved with that, and there are many elements to why that occurs as it pertains to addiction and families with addiction. One of the biggest factors in that regression has to do with family dynamics, how our relationship is, how we engage with one another and as a whole unit. Instead of repeating this cycle, because this is important, this is how addicts become successful in recovery and sobriety, is they have to break patterns. And that's with their behaviors. But here's the thing I want you to know as a family member, doesn't just pertain to substances. This is basically almost every element of their lives they have to adjust and alter and change the way that they are. I think that understanding that as a family member helps us to advocate and interact better with our loved one because we often think it's their problem. They go away and fix it, and then they come back. The dynamic, the dysfunction remains the same. The only thing that's removed is the addiction, which is just causing us additional strife, and we don't need that. That is a very narrow pinpoint perspective. We want to be broader in our approach and how we are analyzing the situation and understanding that it doesn't just come from them. We are all participating in some manner, and we all, as a unit, can improve, can become healthier versions, more balanced versions of ourselves. And that's how, as a unit, we can move together and forward. Let's see. Now, families can be a great source of support for people in recovery, but they can also cause a lot of pain, confusion, and perpetuate these unhealthy dynamics. Families operate like a system. One member behaves a certain way or something's happening, and everybody else responds accordingly. If we think about someone has the flu, everyone stops and moves differently according to that. Maybe you isolate them in the bedroom and maybe you don't go in there and you stop talking to them, or you're only going to message on their phone, leave their food in front of their door. Or maybe everybody in the house is a little bit quieter so that they can get their rest. Perhaps, say it's a parent, they're not going to be taking care of the house or the children or anything else that needs to be taken care of because they're ill and they're kind of tucked away. So everybody else responds to that. They alter their behaviors and perhaps responsibilities during that time. And we can think of addiction as the same way. The family responds by altering, maybe picking up the slack or changing their roles in response to the addiction. Now, this is very normal. However, when you have a cold, it goes away a few days, a week, maybe 2 weeks before you're 100% back. Addiction is not going to go away, but we respond as though it's a cold, or it will resort on its own as long as we give it enough time. So family roles are altered temporarily. This is a temporary response, but it's being used on a permanent or long-term illness. It's not going to resolve the way you think it's going to be resolved. Let's see. Okay, what are some common barriers as it pertains to family members and addicts? Denial is the number one. And I think this is one of the things that makes my job the hardest is it feels very confrontational when we talk about a lot of things at the very beginning because it feels very personal. It feels, I'm trying to knock at this microphone in there because I think it's cheesy, but it's popping up, y'all. Okay. So what was I saying? Goodness. Okay, denial. That's one of the things that makes my job the hardest because I always feel like there's a balancing act. I don't want you to become instantly defensive or put your barriers up with me and just we'll have this blockage where we can't really get past. But I also want to be very realistic and raw in that we have to face certain things, and certain things that are uncomfortable, they have to be placed in the realm of reality or placed in front of us so that we can fully see them. That bearing in mind, a little personal story, as you know, my younger sister, she was an addict for a very long time, and I wasn't around very much. I was off in another location when I came back because I heard there was a problem. I came back and the situation was disclosed to me by my sister. I had to then go and tell our mother, and our mother was in denial. She confessed to me that she just assumed it was marijuana, and it wasn't. It was H, and then it was F. So in her mind, smoking green or grass was a better reality. And she chose to live in that reality because it was more comfortable and she didn't have to confront anything. Nothing had to be altered. Nobody's world was shattered. As long as she was able to be in denial or ignorant, maintaining that for herself, that everything was fine. As we know, it doesn't work like that with addiction. So a lot of the upfront things that we have to deal with as family is confronting realities. Denial is the number one barrier in families. We don't want to admit something's wrong. We don't want to admit it's that bad. We don't want to admit there's an addiction for many reasons. We won't go over the reasons today, but it's diverse in our reasoning for that. And we also don't have to alter our lives if we're able to be in denial. Who wants their life uprooted? No one ever. So if I can stay in denial, my life doesn't have to get uprooted. And you might be like my mother and think, oh, it's just a beer. It's just a little smoking a little grass. Who didn't do that? Who has never done that? You might downplay a lot of situations. Oh, they're prescribed from the doctor. They're for his back. He's been on them for 10 years, but they're for his back pain. The second barrier in families, this is also very big and also very confronting, is enabling. I talk about this so much with my clients and at the rehab and also just in general with people. Enabling is, my social media is always talking about enabling. It's when we're kind of covering up these behaviors. It's like we're still kind of in denial, but we think we can fix it. Or if we just sweep it under the rug, it will be okay, or it might resolve on its own. We'll make excuses. We will take responsibility for things. Really, how I look at enabling is it's the assistant to the addiction. And that's the best way to put it in perspective. It really does help keep addiction alive and thriving. This is tough to talk about because it comes from love and it comes from wanting to be helpful and almost thinking it's just a cold. If I keep them safe, then it will resolve. So it does come from a good place, but it's not helpful. It's not useful. It's not a proper strategy for addiction. It's not going to get you anywhere. And if you're questioning this and you're in this situation, I'm sure you have put a lot of energy into enabling your loved one with the addiction. Something to ask yourself is, has that gotten you any results? Has it changed anything? Has it gotten better? Ask yourself that question and then answer it for yourself. And that's how you'll know if it's a viable strategy or not. Okay, another barrier. This is also one we could talk about forever. Codependency. Codependent relationships are dynamite. They are very dangerous. We don't want to be playing around with it, especially if an addict is involved. If an addict is in a codependent relationship, he goes to rehab. We'll just use he in this example. He goes to rehab, gets clean, gets his act together, comes back out, returns to that relationship, and nothing has changed, then he will relapse. There's zero doubt in my mind because I've seen it a lot of times and there's a lot of information and data about it. That person will relapse because that codependent relationship, they feed off each other and they need each other. So if I am desperate and I need you to fulfill certain things for me, and that's our dynamic, you go away and change, and then you come back a different person. Well, that's not going to work. Our dynamic is not going to function that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sabotage you, do whatever is necessary to return this dynamic back to the way it was before. I can share many stories of this. If you speak with people there, you can gain firsthand perspective. There are books who talk about this. It's there's a lot of data on how that dynamic plays out with addicts, but that's always going to be the case. The addict will never stay clean. It's just not sustainable when they're in a codependent relationship. How does this impact recovery? Well, besides the things that I've already mentioned, we can also talk about how returning to families that are dysfunctional or unhealthy, this can trigger relapse. It's almost like they went away for the short period, did so much work on themselves to go back to the family and almost immediately regress. There's also a lot of reasons why that happens, but we won't dive too deep into that right now or today. Understanding how the family system dynamic functions, that enables an addict to interact differently, to have that self-awareness and be more intentional. And this also ultimately safeguards their recovery. And that's when I'm in these meetings at the rehab, my main priority is to ensure that everybody safeguards their sobriety at all cost. There is zero relationship, zero anything in the world that is worthy of sacrificing sobriety. And that's what I really hone in. And that means sometimes ending relationships, taking pauses from relationships, or interacting differently. That's ultimately the best case scenario, is being able to interact differently, both of us becoming healthier. Usually that's not always the case for them. And another barrier, secrets and shame. If you have a loved one with an addiction, it's shameful. And you usually keep a lot of that secret. Even if it's a close friend, even if it's people you know will understand addiction, it's very difficult to share that situation with people, because even if you think they understand, they don't fully understand because they're not inside the family unit. And it is embarrassing. People have thoughts. If my neighbors know what's going on, if the school knows what's going on, my job, oh my God, my job knows my kid's an addict, what are they going to think about me? They're going to start whispering. It's very uncomfortable to love someone with an addiction. It's you do are you excuse me. You are slightly ashamed of them, but mostly of the situation. Okay, next we transition. There are 7 family roles. If there's addiction in the home, there are 7 roles that family members play. And we're going to run through those a little bit. No particular order. We have the hero. I call this one the distractor. Okay. This is going to be the person who is a high achiever, perfectionist. They're very successful, and they think they can save the family or save face if they achieve a lot and they're very successful. Almost like a magician. Magician's like, hey, look over here. Meanwhile, this hand, who knows what this hand is doing over here? But you're looking at this. I'm shining over here and you can't see down here. And that's basically what the hero does. Little side note, none of these are necessarily bad. What makes them bad and dysfunctional is they're too far swung in one direction. They're not balanced, and they're used as a survival tactic. And because it's out of survival, we swing heavily in one direction where we're not balanced. Okay, the next one would be the scapegoat. This is the one that's the family problems are blamed on. We can sometimes call this person the black sheep of the family. We have these problems because of you. Or there's a problem over here going on. And what do we do with the scapegoat? We use the scapegoat as a means to expel on the situation. If for whatever reason we don't want to get this person in trouble, we'll use the scapegoat to offset that energy onto. And what can happen is the scapegoat usually is a good individual in the family. And after a little while, it starts wearing on them the fact that they're always being blamed or everything is on their shoulders. All the bad is on their shoulders. So they start to act out and they become the troublemaker. They become rebellious. They weren't in trouble because of the rebellion. The rebellion came after. It was the after effect of, you know what? Middle finger in the air, F you all. I'm really gonna cause some hell now. And that's just what the scapegoat does. Okay, the next one, the lost child. This is the invisible one. This is the one that withdraws. They don't engage, especially in conflict, and they try not to have attention set onto themselves. They try to just be invisible, almost become the wallpaper on the wall. If they don't see me, they won't notice me, and then there won't be any strife. They're they tend to be introspective. They're very self-sufficient because they've learned they have to be. And this causes loneliness. They're more susceptible to depression. And they really have a hard time expressing their emotions because their strategy is just disappear. I'm not allowed to talk about it. There's no one I can discuss with it. So they have a hard time connecting with emotions and expressing. Then we have the mascot, and I know y'all know about the mascot. You've heard that comedians actually come from really hard childhoods or hard lives, and that's because their role in the family was developed to be the mascot, the comedian. And they use comedy or just as a distractor really to relieve tension in the home and maybe redirect some energy. They have a hard time taking things seriously. If you've ever known a jokester, they are very hard to switch off from the joke mentality. And it's hard to have a genuine conversation or get deep with them because their defense mechanism is the mascot and they just immediately put that up. And they tend to avoid problems and mask their feelings. And they really have a hard time with intimacy because of that. Right? We have to go deep to have an intimate relationship. And throwing up the comedy every time I'm trying to have a chat with you, we're not going to be able to engage on a deeper level. Then we have the enabler, the fixer, the assistant to the addiction. This person protects the family member with the addiction. They protect them by keeping secrets, covering up for them, shielding consequences. The list goes on and on. Controversially, the enabler is also the one providing money and rides and resources and a home to live in. We also can go on and on about that, but we're not going to go into it too deeply today. The enabler is an entire conversation and very deeply interwoven with the addict. What I want you to remember about the enabler, though, is this person keeps the addict dependent. They really do. They're the assistant to the addiction and they keep the addict dependent. They're taking power from the addict to feed to themselves so that they're needed in some way. The enabler has difficulty with boundaries and they perpetuate, allow, facilitate destructive behavior. Then we have the caretaker. This is the responsible one. This person is overly responsible for everyone else's well-being or care. And we can think one great example of this is if the parent in the home is an addict, a child might step up and become the caretaker, doing dishes, laundry, cleaning the house, tending to the other children, maybe waking the parent up. So this child should be a child, but really it's stepped into the caretaker role and it's become overly responsible for everyone else. The caretaker also has poor boundaries. They avoid conflict and they're very neglectful for themselves. And then number 7, the addict. This is the family member with the addiction. There's a lot of isolation and shame, and they repeat cycles. Something to note about these roles is they aren't set in stone, though most of us tend to be one or two of these roles dominantly. We might have recessive roles within the family, and our dynamics with different family members can change. If we take the example with the parent with the addiction and the child is stepped into the role as a caretaker, maybe that child is just caretaking for the mother with the addiction. And for the rest of the family, that child might step into the lost child role and try to just be invisible to everyone else. So we're a little bit dynamic and we can shift depending on what's happening or who we're interacting with. But usually there's an overarching role that each member plays within the family. And roles that are established in childhood, they continue into adulthood. Like the mascot role. That child learned to be the entertainment, to ease people's pain, ease tension, and they continue to honor that role as an adult. And that's their strategy as an adult. So something to remember, unless you've intentionally done work to change your role, it's going to be basically the same strategies as when you were a kid trying to survive. All these roles feed into dysfunction. They feed into unhealthy relationships. And you better believe they do cause relapse through triggers and resurrecting old behavioral patterns. They can also cause sobriety sabotage. Believe it or not, I'm not saying you, but somebody. Family members sabotage their loved one's sobriety. It happens all the time. I see it a devastating amount of time. I really don't like this, and that's part of why I'm passionate about my work is I want us family members to understand our role and how we participate in the dynamics. But sabotage is very real and very common. And also, it can cause the person in recovery stunted growth. You're sober. So stop going to meetings. Why are you so obsessed with this? Just get over it. Like, be normal. There's this lack of understanding, but also a lack of encouragement for progression. Many reasons why we do this. I'm not going to get into that today, but just we want to start trickling in some awareness. How do we stop this? How can we break this cycle of dysfunction? Great question. I will answer. Awareness is really the first step. We want to recognize awareness. Now, this goes for you and it also goes for other family members. The strategy that I really love is to step back and observe the family or observe the other person and really take some notes on how we interact with each other, how this person engages, how the other person responds. We want to take note of their behaviors and their actions. Within that, once we become aware of them, It's a lot easier to become aware of ourselves. She always pokes my button every single Christmas, every single Thanksgiving. When I come over here, she's always pushing my buttons. Okay, great. Next, what am I doing? How am I playing a role in that? What's my participation in that? Okay, she pushes my buttons, fine, but I always respond. I always lash out. I always get upset and storm off. I always run to the bar and get a beer. What's my response? Because that's also going to be very important in the awareness is how am I being in this relationship? Which leads us to number 2, personal responsibility versus blame. As you know, you cannot control other people. We cannot control other people if they're dysfunctional, if they're off balance, if whatever is going on. We can't dictate anything to them. It's their life and they're responsible for it. And what they choose is what they choose. In this dynamic, when we're talking about loved ones and family members, we want to understand that instead of saying, well, you always push my buttons, we want to take personal responsibility. Yeah, they push my buttons, but I always engage. They push that button and I turn on. They push that button and I always fly off the handle. So that's taking personal responsibility. We can't control that they're going to push our buttons, but we can control what our response is. And the only way to really do that, if we want to break the cycle, is to change that behavior. The only way we're going to get different results is through different behaviors. The third is setting boundaries. And this is hard. When you talk about setting a new boundary with someone you've known your whole life, they're going to push back on it. They're going to try to resist it and make a game out of seeing how fast they can have you surrendering your new precious boundary that's healthy. Oh, you're healthy. And they do this because, well, there's a lot of reasons, but it's very triggering for someone to come in after a little stint away and be this new person. Oh, you're better now? Most people aren't going to accept that. And what I want to do is make it so that you're not over there, you're down here with me. We're in the gutter together. And that's why we get that pushback on boundaries. However, boundaries are absolutely essential. This is going to be the key to altering behaviors and relationship dynamics. If your boundary is, we're not going to get in an argument, and the next time they push your button, you disengage and you express yourself. I'm not arguing. We aren't raising our voices. I'm going to go for a walk. And when I come back, if you want to talk about it, let's do it. But if you want to argue, I'm not going to engage with that. Very cut and dry. And no matter how much they try to bid to get you to argue, you don't engage. And maybe you give them a couple chances and then you say, you know what? I think it's best if we take a little bit of a cool off. How about I give you a call next week? Because we have to make sure we aren't sacrificing those boundaries. That's going to be the tool to altering behaviors. Because if that person keeps bidding and you keep stoic and you refuse to respond, you refuse to move your boundaries, that's going to force this other person into some sort of change. Either, well, let's see, there's many ways they could respond. Ultimately, we hope that they change their behaviors. Sometimes they're a little hard-headed and they refuse to give up, but let's fingers crossed. They understand that this no longer gets them what it is that they're after. That's where we get that changed behaviors. This safeguards the person in recovery. It also preserves their mental state, which is essential for recovery and staying sober, is making sure we have a good mental state. And this is also going to prevent us from engaging in unhealthy ways. Okay, number 4 is rewriting the narrative. I grew up this way. This has always been how our relationship has functioned. Just because it's always gone one way doesn't mean it has to continue going in that way. At any point, this is your permission. At any point in your life with any person, under any circumstance, you can change. You can decide that something no longer serves you or you don't want to do that anymore, and you can change. There's a lot of pressure on each other to remain the same, and it will take a lot of bravery, but you are allowed to change. And guess what? If the other person doesn't like it, they don't want it, they don't respect it, understand it, whatever, that's fine. You don't have to understand or respect my journey, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to continue on my journey. Okay? So making sure that we understand boundaries are healthy and important. And boundaries, y'all, we passed that. We're a narrative. We want to rewrite our narrative. So just because we've always done something doesn't mean we're going to keep doing that thing. Let's see. Okay. Other ways we breaking the cycle is reflection, journaling, role reversal exercises. We can imagine playing different roles with family members, and this can always just be a visualization process. We don't have to go to therapy and do role reversal or be in the physical presence and have them participate. We can do this in our head. Okay, this time when I go home for the holidays or this family function, she's not going to push my buttons. Or we can imagine she's going to try to push my buttons and I'm going to be cool and calm and collected, and it's not going to affect me or impact me. Visualizing that in our head helps prime us, helps prep us for that new behavior. Emotional regulation is a huge one. This is going to stop us from the response. If somebody is triggering you or luring you back into that old going to ensure that you remain calm and you have your higher perspective on what it is you're working toward. So I have goals. I am developing myself. I am trying to be a better person every day, every year. Emotional regulation helps to maintain focus on those goals and helps preserve our states of being. If I get triggered and I emotionally dysregulate and I fly off the handle behaviors, and I'm also more likely to stunt my personal development growth. And let's see. Here's one, is celebrating our growth. I am an advocate for celebrating wins. And this goes along with that, celebrating our growth. How did I make advancements? What little thing did I accomplish today or with this person? They tried to push my buttons and I didn't respond. Guess what? That's a win. Making sure we recognize ourselves and celebrate the fact that they tried to engage me, but I didn't take the bait. Making sure that we celebrate the fact that we changed, and that encourages us to maintain and continue that change. And that's it. I mean, we covered a few more things, but we're going to keep it there. We did a 40 minutes today. It was a pretty good one. I am happy to have shared what we talked about today. And I'm happy to share or start introducing you to your role as a family member of an addict and start expressing these topics to you so that we can explore them further and we can also improve how we are, how we interact, how we love, what our relationship is like. Ultimately, we want to enhance and become better. And so that's the goal of today. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye.